Color's good. Picture's good.
Good morning.
It's afternoon. It's 1 minute after 12.
Cool.
So, welcome to, what do we call this thing? Take Action Tuesday. Welcome to Take Action Tuesday. We're live on Tara's Facebook feed, and we're live on my Facebook feed, I think. Now we're live on my Facebook feed.
There we go. We're everywhere.
We're everywhere.
All right.
Cool. So we wanted to talk today about consciousness. Now, it's not the concept of being conscious as opposed to functioning unconsciously, where we're just literally at the will of our unconscious mind to launch us into problem states or patterns of behavior. We want to talk about how to achieve consciousness, and I need to fix a camera before we go any further.
So there's so much talk out there about living consciously. So I know in my own reading over the last few years, whether I'm reading a lot of the stuff that Oprah Winfrey talks about, a lot of the stuff that people in the personal development field have been referring to, and certainly when people sort of divert away from a traditional religious belief. So there's a lot of people out there who don't identify with being religious per se, but they still feel as though they're deeply spiritual. So they still feel as though there is a greater sense than themselves, that there is something that is more important than just this like physical being, and that there is more than just this life. And yet they don't connect it necessarily to a particular religion with a dogma and a historical, theology and everything else. And a lot of that stuff, a lot of those conversations end up coming to this idea of living consciously. A Seed of the Soul, Gary Zukav, does a lot of really, really cool, fascinating explanations about what this means to be living consciously. So Alan works with a lot of Joe Dispenza's stuff. We both have done a lot of work, and kind of cool because in this case it's actually a little bit different. I've gone a little bit in one direction, Al's gone a little bit in the other. But what we recognize and what we realize is that both work really complementary to the work that we do in NLP. And even though we're both sort of learning these different streams, when we come together and we talk about it, so often that's where we end up, right? Is at this idea of living consciously, which is interesting because in NLP, our big, the big selling point of NLP, the reason why we can make such amazing change, why we've been able to witness, hundreds of lives change, is because of the unconscious work that we do. So sometimes we actually, if you sat in one of Alan and our trainings, we kind of come down on the conscious mind. We kind of we give it a hard time because it's the conscious mind that is so caught up in what other people think and how much we weigh and what our peers are doing and how much we've accomplished and all that kind of stuff, right? All the stuff that seems to make us feel like shit on a daily basis, if you're in that particular mindset, tends to be this conscious stuff, right? And so we often talk, not often, most of the time, what we're talking about is making change on an unconscious level.
We actually talk about integrating the conscious and unconscious to create an integration between the two, to create a congruence between the two.
So what we thought we would do today is just talk about this in terms of NLP practitioners. Many of you out there who listen to us live and who listen to us after are NLP practitioners or studying NLP in one form or the other. And just for general interest, it's a really interesting, because it's such a big concept, this idea of living consciously, to explore it from all sorts of different angles. And so today we're just going to offer one more way of thinking about how do you do this thing called living consciously and actually experience a change in your life, a positive change in your life as a result.
So as an entry here, we normally start the sessions with talking about breaking state, going into peripheral vision, firing an anchor, and moving into a new state. That, in fact, is an active conscious awareness. So I'm conscious that I'm in a bad mood, and I make a choice to break that state. And then I break the state by reading a telephone number backwards on an imaginary billboard. And then while I'm looking up, I choose to go into peripheral vision. Now I'm consciously choosing to relax. And then once I'm relaxed and I notice my respiration rate is slowed down and my heart rate is starting to slow down and my breathing is now in my belly, then I fire my resource anchor and I move to a resourceful state. This is consciously being aware of a state I don't want to be in and taking active states, which is conversely what your unconscious mind would do. Your unconscious mind, once you're in that negative place, may keep you in that negative state. And you would start doing all the 10,000 things that you've done before unconsciously. And so even what we're sharing with you now for, I think we're at 110 days of COVID or some phenomenal number, it's large. Mm-hmm. Every day, every time we've come live, we've shared that process of creating a new pattern of behavior. And when we're talking about a new pattern of behavior, we're actually installing, because we're consciously aware we don't like our negative emotional states. We break the state, we get calm, and then we go to resource state. If you do that enough, it becomes your unconscious pattern. Now, you can do it unconsciously. So, if you just start there, if you just think about becoming conscious, whenever you're in a negative state, move yourself to a positive state, that's a higher level of consciousness. Now, it's a very functional level of consciousness, but it's an example of being conscious of both the situation and about your ability to change it.
Cool. Yeah, so let's start from the inside out. So the first thing to understand in terms of living consciously is that we are 90% of what we do, give or take. 90% of what we do, what we think, how we behave, how we respond is all generated from our unconscious mind, right? So this is really easy to understand when we think about things like, growing our hair or having our heart beat and, the whole system that runs the machine that is our body. It's easy to accept, but of course I don't really know actually how to, make the ventricles or whatever in my heart do what they need to do. And yet I trust that my unconscious mind takes care of that for me.
You're not growing your hair right now?
Yeah, not consciously.
Oh.
And yet we seem to also accidentally accept the truth of that when it comes to our emotions, our behaviors, our responses, our feelings. And so the first thing to do in this process is to really get it, that most of what's happening throughout your waking hours is happening unconsciously. So whenever you respond to something, right? So of the 1,000 actions that happened in the last 5 minutes of your life, right? So you might have picked up a cup and taken a sip of your coffee, and you might have looked out the window and unconsciously thought to yourself, it's a nice day outside, it's sunny, and then made this presupposition that it's going to be warm, right? I'm pretty comfortable allowing my unconscious mind to look out the window in July on a sunny day and say, yeah, shorts will do, right? And that's not a conscious process. I don't actually have to go through that I wonder, sunny days in the winter, I don't mean that, so what is it, right? Because I just unconsciously have these default assumptions that work for me most of the time. So when we have unconscious, the structure of the unconscious is that it learns things, right? The 1-year-old doesn't know what it means when it looks out the window and sees the sun outside. Can't tell at all yet whether or not that means that it's going to be warm or cold. They probably just have this really cool experience of seeing the sunshine and all the sparkles and all that kind of stuff, right? So we start to learn, we gather this information as we go through life. And then what our brain does, what we are so beautifully designed to do, is to accept what is certain. And then what happens is that our unconscious mind just defaults to what we already know. So when we look outside, it literally doesn't even, my brain has just bypassed my conscious mind. When I look outside, I can assume that in July, in Canada, if it's sunny outside, it's going to be warm. And my brain knows because...
No, not in Alberta.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I should say in Ontario, Southern Ontario. But it just defaults to what it already knows and believes as a certainty.
Yes.
And it will affirm that. So if I went outside on a July day with sun and I suddenly was like, it was 0 degrees, I would be befuddled. And it would take my mind some time to adjust to that, right? So that really, really simple example just means that you have to understand, in order to live consciously, that every single time you don't pay conscious attention to what's going on, it means that your unconscious is defaulting to what it already believes to be true, whether or not it's true. And I can expand on that whether or not it's true bit.
Absolutely. So we have some patterns in our unconscious mind that support us all the time, right? And our unconscious patterns are surrounded by beliefs. And to have a belief, you must have decided to believe that. Now, our beliefs we make based on the information available to us. We call that the map of the territory. We each have a map of our reality, right? How we perceive the world. Now, we're building our maps, our view of the world, based on limited information, because we know from the NLP communication model and formal psychology that we're being bombarded with information, 2 million bits per second, and we're handling just a tiny little bit, 134 bits. So if you're trying to make a map of the world, of the territory you live in, based on only a small, tiny fraction of the information, the chance that your map is 100% accurate is not possible. And yet we make decisions and beliefs about our world, and then those beliefs, when practiced often enough, become our unconscious patterns of behavior. And we defend our behavior because we know, as Tara said, that we believe it's absolutely true, because we created a map of our world based on limited information. But once the map's made, we hold on to it, we cling to it. And to change that map, to become more consciously aware, requires work in the unconscious. So the paradox here is to become more conscious. To seek more consciousness actually requires work undoing into your present. Mm-hmm. And when you bring records from your past into your present, you're destined to repeat the past. So this morning I was listening to Wayne Dyer talk about the Tao Te Ching. It's one of my favorite ways to start my morning routine. But he was talking about lesson 26, living calmly. And at one part he said, so decide today, instead of reacting how you normally react calmly. As if you could just decide to do it, when we're triggered into areas where we get all animated, there's not part of my conscious mind that says, boy, this looks like a good time to get animated. I think I'll get really animated. I think I'll get animated, and then I'll get frustrated, and then I'll get angry. I don't think like that. It just happens autonomically. So I was struck listening to Wayne Dyer, because he talks about higher consciousness. He talks about intention. And he was a brilliant educator. His materials are phenomenal. And yet, the tool to move from what he was teaching in lesson 26, live calmly, from living in this uncontrolled, unconscious, reactionary way, to moving into a consciousness where you decide, there was no tool in between. And that's what prompted us to be here talking about possibilities of achieving consciousness.
I just want to jump in, because one of the
jump in with both feet.
that place of calm. So one of the things that living consciously, being consciously aware, allows you to do is simply to notice that you're being conscious, right? It doesn't always lead to like a different outcome. But the difference between allowing yourself to just unconsciously kind of like ride the roller coaster of all of the beliefs and all of that stuff, which we know, as we've already have said, today and a million other times, we're so full of truths that we think are true that are not true and that don't serve us, right? The beliefs about ourselves that are negative in the world that are negative. So when we allow ourselves to just unconsciously be swayed by all of this, we don't have an opportunity for that calm, because we're constantly, we are human beings that are like the most, complex thing you could imagine in terms of like the way that our emotional responses can trigger so many things inside us. And so what that conscious awareness does is allows us to like go on Facebook. I don't know about you guys, but it is, I have to really plan when I'm going to go on Facebook and start reading about like masks or no masks and distance or don't distance, or
how to
kids
potty
go
train
to-
bunnies.
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
Oh.
But I mean, we're so Black Lives Matter, or whatever the other million arguments are out there. So there's so many things that are like so divisive, and if I allow myself to just like start reacting based on my values and my own biases and my own feelings and my own experience and everything else, it's just this sort of like gong show inside, right? And not to say that's a bad thing. I don't think that emotionally reacting, but if I haven't chosen to do that, if I'm at the mercy of what's happening to me, it's a very out of control place to be, which causes us to go into our sympathetic and to feel stressed and to not have our most resourceful self. When you're conscious of it, what you may find yourself doing is just noticing like, oh, I just read, this thing, and I feel like I'm boiling inside. And you can take that moment to just notice consciously that you've obviously been hooked, right? So paying attention to like what hooked me here, not necessarily with the intention of even changing it, but just recognizing that you have something within you that's been triggered into a response, and then consciously noticing that you could choose a place of witness to this, and then carry on, but you're not now sort of under the pull or the momentum of it. Instead, you're noticing it, which allows you to you can still have the reaction, right? We call these like meta positions, where you can actually sort of notice that like, I'm having this reaction of rage right now.
Meta just mean overarching.
Yeah, so you're having this reaction of rage, and then ask yourself, consciously notice, that's really interesting. And either, it may be something that you want to do something about, or it may be something that you just simply notice, and then carry on. And that consciousness, what you're actually doing is you're just like a muscle. You're just getting used to consciously noticing your reactions instead of being your reactions, right? And
say that again. Becoming consciously aware of your reaction instead of just being your reaction.
And that's step one of living consciously. You can do whatever you want with it from there. I would say I spent a lot of time in that space, just like witnessing. I'm doing this because I feel like I sort of like get up and out of it, look down.
You do.
And then notice it. Before I felt really capable of doing a whole lot about it, because in some cases it was like, wait a minute, this rage still feels like really justified when it's somebody being ignorant or mean or harming others or whatever, right? But I don't know what to do with it yet. But still, the power in noticing that. You will notice. I don't even know what you will notice. It'll be different for everyone, but you will notice something. And then, like a muscle that you're exercising, it gives you that opportunity. All of a sudden, when you least expect it, you don't even realize it's about to happen. All of a sudden, you'll have this time where like you react to something, and because you've been flexing this muscle, because you've been practicing, you'll go, I wonder why I'm reacting that way. Oh, right, that was because this person just said this and it actually has nothing to do with it. And now, in that calm space of being conscious, you just realize that you don't need to react that way. And you've caught yourself now, right? Now you've given yourself that opportunity to say, I'm going to choose to react differently. And so you've got to be patient with this living consciously business. Because it really is a muscle that you've got to develop just by noticing first.
And it's such a powerful perspective to get to. Now, again, I was struck today by when I heard Wayne Dyer talk, I started reviewing in my mind all the other people that I've been hearing talking about living at a higher consciousness. And I was trying to review and say, did they give me any tools to actually achieve the higher consciousness? Did they actually address how I might make that migration? And then I started to think about our clients, and especially the successful versus the less successful clients. And when our clients are really successful, just as Tara said, they start reporting back to us that, oh yeah, I met so-and-so, and normally I would have felt this way. Mm-hmm. And I felt it start to come on, and then I said, why am I doing that? There's no reason to go there. Why don't I go here emotionally? Mm-hmm. And now they're being present. They're very, very present in the moment. They're present feeling. They're not at the mercy of their reactions. They're not just on that, what did you call it, just being your reactions. And it's so profound that our clients give us that feedback. And so here in COVID-19, Eckhart Tolle talks about when anything adverse happens in life, nothing stays the same. None of us are staying the same ever. We're not in stasis. We're either getting better or we're getting worse. None of us or any system is ever stable and staying the same. So Eckhart Tolle was explaining that when we confront adversity, and certainly COVID-19's been both a gift and adversity for all of us, that one of two things happen. Either people get further into their unconscious patterns of being fearful, having anxiety, they go further into their unconscious patterns, or they become more conscious about the threat and the possibilities. They become conscious of the whole. Now, in all the work that we do, we were trained that everything we do should create wholeness and choice. And when I heard Eckhart Tolle this morning talking about you'll go one of two ways. You'll get further into your unconscious behavior. And in the Tao Te Ching, they talk about this spinning effect, where the people are just constantly in motion, spinning, like your mind is spinning about all the bad things that could happen. Or you will grow and become more conscious about where you are, what the reality of your surroundings are, and what's possible. And Tara and I talked to a lot of people about how they're dealing right now in this crazy COVID-19 period, and and it's not a split. It's not they're on this side or that side. It's this continuum of a behavior. And if we took it, it would be a great research project now with this sort of level of consciousness. Say the people that are really fearful, the people that are, they're even worried about what's going to happen next fall, next Christmas, next winter. They're spinning in here in this unconscious pattern. And then we've met a whole other people at this end of the continuum that have literally turned their lives around. They started doing things for themselves that they never gave themselves time to do previously. Maybe exercise, maybe meditating, maybe diets. They're spending more time with their children. They're having family meals because everybody's stuck at home. They're not running around. They're not activity rich. They're not just spinning between activities. Mm-hmm. So, and wherever you get your point of light, wherever you resonate with, whether it's listening to Oprah Winfrey or Gary Zukav, amazing book, right? That's an amazing book. Seed of the Soul. Absolutely amazing book. Or if it's as I am and Joe Dispenza or Wayne Dyer or Eckhart Tolle, it doesn't matter where you get that point of light. When you listen to what they're saying about being more present in the now and being more conscious. And we know in what we do that there are many modalities that will help people move that. We happen to practice NLP and timeline therapy and hypnosis, and we know that the tools we have can specifically address the issues, the patterns inside the unconscious mind, so you can actually choose to be more conscious. And so we thought we'd get together today and just talk about that paradox, that dichotomy. It is a paradox that to become more conscious, you have to undo some things that are in the unconscious mind. So I'm going to put some pressure on Tara right now and say, do you have an exercise to take us out of here today?
I was trying to interrupt you to get in.
Oh, okay, she does.
Yeah, so here's what I would challenge you with. In terms of living consciously, the easiest way to notice this is to create some polarities within yourself. So the most unconscious responses are the ones that we feel like we can't help, right? So like, I can't help but when I see this situation unfold, I react a certain way. I can't help but be nervous, or I can't help but, like, if a waiter is rude to me, I can't help but blah, 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 blah. Okay, so if there's anything that you feel like I can't help but, even if it's like a person, right? I can't help but dislike this person. I can't help but. I would challenge you to try on what is like the exact opposite. So not just like a little bit more calm or a little bit more compassionate or whatever, but the exact opposite. So if you're someone who would say, when a rude waiter is rude to me, I can't help but get frustrated and irritated because I only go out, and whatever your big excuse is, right? I only go out once a month and we spend a blah, blah, blah. Okay, try on the exact opposite, right? So it would be when a waiter is rude to me, I feel so much empathy, I worry about them. I wonder what's wrong. I choose to reach out even more. I choose to make their experience of being my waiter at my table even easier for them. And I'm even kinder than I would be if they came to me with kindness, because I know that they're obviously not feeling very great. People don't act rude unless there's something yucky going on in them. And so I choose to be, so you do like the polar opposite of what you think you have no choice but to respond as or with. If there's somebody that you say, like, I can't help but dislike this person, look at them and imagine if you loved them. Truly. Like, just look at them and imagine, what if this was someone that I truly loved?
I'm not going to restaurants.
And then, I don't mean the waiter anymore, I want some, But just notice how it changes. And that is conscious. That is like, you don't have to give up anything about yourself that you believe in and that you think, works really well for you, whatever. You don't need to give it up, but you do need to notice that you have the choice, and this world will become such a different place. I want to end with the funniest thing.
I want to end.
No,
I want to tell a story.
I can tell you one first,
Okay.
because you're going to tell it. Yeah. We talked about these truths that we take on unconsciously. So Al and I talk all the time about how there's such thing as a negative, right? There is no no, there is no not. Your brain can't do not. You can't not see something or not be something. If we say don't see the blue tree, you can't not see the blue tree first. You can replace it or do whatever with it, but first your brain has to go there, right? So we always say to each other, to our clients and to our kids and everything, we're very annoying to be around. We'll say,
Yes.
whatever, don't say what you don't want, right? So my daughter is 6 years old, and she's going through a little phase of her life where she's a little bit of a princess, and she doesn't really like bugs, and she doesn't really like being itchy, and she doesn't like being hot, and she doesn't like being cold, and so she kind of hates being outside right now. And the two boys are like, all they want to do is hike and be in the forest and everything else.
And be covered in bugs.
And so we went on a walk this morning, we were down by the river, and Tessa was doing her like, I hate it out here, I hate it out here. And the boys were so mad at her, and they were like, you ruin everything, every time we go you ruin it. So I started giving Reese, our oldest, both of them, but it was mainly Reese, and I'm giving him this lecture about, like, because she had gone sulking separate from us, and I said, Reese, stop telling her what she is, right? Because the more you tell her that she doesn't like to be, outside, and she doesn't like the outdoors, she's going to become that more and more. So what we need to do is to encourage her about what she is. So we have to encourage her to she's good in the outdoor and she likes it and everything. Reese looks at me and listens to me. I notice he's listening really carefully, and he sort of nods. He looks over at Tessa and he goes, Tessa, you're a duck. I just about peed myself. But he had heard my message. You will become what you are told you are.
Turning his sister into a duck.
He was so excited. It's like, how many times do I have to tell her she's a duck before she turns into a duck? It was amazing.
I don't know if I can top that story. I don't know if I should try.
It was the quickness. So okay, Tess, you're a duck.
But I am going to tell one story about consciousness and choice, okay? And it's not as funny as that story. In Vancouver, I used to live in Vancouver, and leaving downtown Vancouver, there's a street called Thurlow Street. It's 5-lane wide, one way. Now during the day, it's parking on 2 sides and 3 lanes, but at rush hour, it's 5 lanes wide. And everybody leaves the city heading south on Thurlow, and everybody's moving fast. I was coming off a side street in my Toyota 4Runner, 4,000-pound truck with a manual transmission. So I'm looking to my left, looking for an opening to enter traffic, and the traffic's going by fast. And I see the opening coming, and I'm following the opening, and I get on the gas and get off the clutch. The truck rises up, and as I go here, there's a person standing right in front of my truck. And I hammer on the brakes, and the nose of the truck drops down, and I don't want to look up. I don't know if I've hit that person. I have my head down like this. I don't want to look up. I'm holding the steering wheel. My elbow's on my windowsill. And I look up finally, and I see the man walking around the side of my truck, and I think, oh boy, this is going to get ugly. And my window's down, my arm's here, and he puts both hands on my forearm, and now my sympathetic nervous system's rising up because now I'm vulnerable, right? And he smiles this big, beautiful smile. And he looks at me and he says, are you all right? I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. I said, am I all right? I said, I almost drove you into the afterlife, into the traffic. And he said, I know, but stuff happens. He said, but you seem really distraught. Are you all right? And I said, yeah, I'll be all right in a second. And he smiled and he walked away. And I think about that story. I tell that story whenever I teach, because there was a person in the moment who was totally conscious, who didn't allow his unconscious, which he had every right to get revved up and come around and rip me. But he didn't. He saw the stress on me and the distress on me, and he asked me if I was okay. And in that moment, he diffused everything. He diffused everything. My anxiety to get home, my heat to get on the gas, to get in a rush hour, go do battle in rush hour, just dissipated. And I think about him, and I think about the level of consciousness that he must exist at, and he almost got run over, and he was calm. He was in his parasympathetic nervous system. And I'm never got to where he is with all the work we do and try to do. Never been there. But boy, as one of my role models, as one of my goals, I want to be like that guy. So I think, unless you have another story to tell.
No, Matthew says that just happened to him 3 months ago.
Right on.
Amazing. Thanks, Matthew.
Right on.
Your comments.
All right, guys. Hey, have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday at noon. Who knows what we'll unpack then, but we'll have fun doing it. Cheers.